The following is part of Cornell Contemporary China Initiative Lecture Series under the Cornell East Asia program. The arguments and viewpoints of this talk belong solely to the speaker. We hope you enjoy.
So welcome to the new season of the Cornell Contemporary China Initiative. My name is Nick Adamson. I'm a professor in the Department of Asian Studies. And I'm here representing the East Asia program. The Contemporary China Initiative is a function of the East Asia program. It's a weekly lecture series that's for the Cornell community and the larger community if you're seeing this on the internet. I'd also like because this is the first lecture of the season, I'd like to thank the people who make it possible. Robin McNeil, who founded the initiative, who's not with us, he's on leave this semester. Josh Young, who's here, Amal Lane, Nancy Liang, who make this reasonably complicated situation hopefully very easy for the speakers and for me. I'm also really honored to introduce our first speaker of the semester, Professor Kam-Wing Chan from the University of Washington. Professor Chan is the author of two books. He's a professor of geography at the University of Washington. He's the author of two books. The first one, and it's a long title, so I'm going to get it exactly right, Cities with Invisible Walls, Reinterpreting Urbanization in Post-1949 China, and also the volume Urbanization with Chinese Characteristics, which came out, is now out in 2018, so it's brand new. He's written, I think, literally 1 million articles, which I won't list for you. You can quote me, he has 1 million articles in press, and has also consulted for the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the United Nations, and I think his research has been used in policy in many different ways. So I'm very excited to see what he has to tell us today, and I hope that you can all join me in welcoming him to Cornell.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's really a delight to come to visit this campus. I have heard of Cornell since 1980s. I was even thinking about coming here. Ended up somebody gave me some more money in Canada, so I went to Toronto. So I missed this place. And finally, this is my first time to come to Cornell, so it's really a delight. And thanks to the East Asia program, and Nick and Amala both worked really hard to make things look very easy, somewhat easy to me. I woke up 4 o'clock this morning to catch the bus to come here. But I have a couple of cup of coffees. Actually 3 cups, including one on the bus, which is really nice. That you reminded me. I almost forgot about that nice bus. So I'm okay. I can debate with you all kinds of stuff, but since the first part is being taped, so I'll be a little bit cautious. I'll talk about the real thing. The real thing's at the end, after it's not being taped. But let me do my presentation, okay, today. I think this is an issue as a very, very large issue to me, and maybe to China too, I would argue. And as I look at this in the last several years more, you will notice that urbanization, of course, is my baby for a long time. So this is something I started doing in the 80s, and all along I'm a single subject, professor. I just work among things, urbanization. So I've written millions of things, as Nick said, but that's not quite true. But in any case, the children issue started to really to appear on my radar screen more so, and I was just telling Nick that as I done this more, as increasingly there's actually some connection even to my past history, to my history of my growing up. And so I wrote a piece. I'll send you to see that piece if you're interested. It's more of my personal journey, which has relevance to this, but today is not talking about my personal journey. It's not the occasion to talk about this. So today I'm going to talk about more the larger picture of the children in China. So what I would like to begin here is to show you some picture that I visited. I went to in 2015. In fact, I'm going to visit this school again next month. I'll be in Shanghai for another month, and this is really my school that I've been going to a few times already. This is a migrant school in Pudong in Shanghai, September 2015, around this time. Actually, it was around the Mid-Autumn Festival. Today is the Mid-Autumn Festival Day. We all Chinese celebrate this. The school actually looks pretty nice. It has about 500 students around that time. I think it seems that it has declined. From grade 1 to 5. In Shanghai, the elementary school covers only 1 to 5. Grade 6 is middle school. Okay, that's very special. Actually, elsewhere in China is 1 to 6. That's the elementary school. But in Shanghai, there's something that's special. And it's all, the students here are all migrant students. Around that time, it's about 500 of them, from grade 1 to 5. And the migrant children, of course, is a special category of children in China. They come here with their parents from other provinces. In this particular case, most of them, as I talk to and so on, talk with them, they come from, most of them, I think 70% came from Anhui, which is the province not too far away from Shanghai. They do not have Shanghai household registration status. They do not have Shanghai hukou. That's the most important distinction, that they came, or I will use the present tense, they come here without Shanghai's hukou or household registration. Is a kind of residential permit or status, and I will explain this a little more. So I consider that migrant children, in my bigger scheme of work, I think they are the luckier children of the migrant, of the children of the migrant. Because we'll talk about another category which not so lucky. In this particular school, I think especially even luckier, I would say. This is better because the school receives support from an NGO. The NGO, which I like a lot, is called Stepping Stone. You can Google Stepping Stone. You can find out more their work, which provide native English speaker volunteer to teach English in this school. So I was visiting on that day, I think it's a Friday, that this volunteer came to help. Okay, so what is happening there is in each class, 1 through 5, sometimes there are 2 classes for each grade, sometimes 3, depend. It's roughly 2 to 3 classes for each grade. Each grade, I went to each of them. You can see that it's well supported. The volunteers are very energetic, very thoughtful, very careful. And when I reflect, I was sitting in the class at the back, I was watching some, I see that the English they receive, they are receiving around that time is definitely better than the English teacher that I have around the same grade. I grew up in Hong Kong. I learned English in elementary school, but there's no way that I was only exposed to native speaker when I was in high school. We only have some Chinese English teacher that teach. I mean, I still actually connect with my grade 1 English teacher. He was the one who really opened the door for me to all this whole new world. Without him, because just prior to that, I was in China. I was a kid. I moved to China. So this is where it's up. So this is what is happening. You can see that this is another volunteer teacher that was using props and all kinds of things to get children interested. During recess time, you can see that these are the kids. They ran around in the hallway. They screamed. They even got a little bit rowdy, I would say. Just like many other kids, normal kids would do. When after sitting in the class for 40 minutes or so, they came out and run around elsewhere. As the principal of the school later told me, we had lunch together, talked about all the things that I saw and so on. These are very rough kids, tough kids, maybe tough kid, that's the right word, not rough, tough kids. From the countryside, from Shanghai, local kids. Okay. The example she gave me was that these countryside kids coming from the side are more adventurous. They run, they do a lot of things, they jump up and down more than the local kid, a lot more. And the Shanghai kids tend to sit more straight and behave, so to speak. Okay. And when they sometimes they trip, they fall down, they get up immediately, they seldom cry. Okay, which is quite different from the local kids who cry. Once they fell down. Even if they get hurt, have some scratches, something, she said, they just wipe out and say, hey, there's nothing. That's this mostly Anhui kids are doing. And they're also very happy. You can see, I think this is, they at least look happy to me when I try to take a picture of them. They make all these things, and so I think these are the more, even I would argue that maybe even more normal than the local kid in some way, because the local kids sit straight, and the teacher was worried that they would get hurt, and sometimes I heard that they were not even allowed to get out of the classroom because they can get themselves in trouble. They don't want that teacher. So in a way, these kids grew up, in this case, not in Anhui, back in the hometown there in Shanghai, in these nice schools, and being able to do all these things, and having really very good English teaching lessons, which was much better than my English teacher. So you can imagine that one day, if they start from there and having something similar to mine, they have a better foundation than my foundation. You can see that, that's definitely, because they will be able to hear English at a much early age. I still mispronounce a lot of words even after being in North America for 30 years, because if you don't learn certain things when you're young, you're never going to learn it, unfortunately. That's why, guys. So use your time when you're young to learn. It's very, very important. Well, on this, I think I need to really also tell you the other picture. This is really the unfortunate kid that I've been paying a lot of attention to. And there are actually a very close connection with the other kids, the other migrant kids. And we actually, in the last several years, we have read a lot of stories. There are thousands of stories on this, and some of them are very tragic that make themselves into headlines, international headlines. CNN, BBC, all these major news will talk about all this, report all this, but you may not have caught your attention. Okay, and here are two, the most tragic one. One was in 2015, when just 3 months before I visited that school, out there, because 4 children were found dead in their home in Guizhou province. The one boy and his 3 sisters were left behind in the poor village without a lot of proper care. They decided that they're going to end their life. So the eldest, the boy, started the whole thing, and they have a mass committed suicide together by drinking pesticide. Okay, so they killed themselves. The oldest boy was only 13 years old, and his youngest sister was 5. So this is all these 4 kids belong to one family, decided to take their life, by drinking pesticide. Also equally tragically, just not too long ago in 2012, almost in the same location, same village, another bunch of kids, 5 of them, 5 boys, was playing in the wintertime. They got themselves in the dumpster. They felt that the dumpster was warmer. They were playing, it was cold in winter, and they were there. They got poisoned by the poisonous gas in the dumpster, and they all got killed. So you can see that these are some very, very tragic, the extreme side of all these. And it really draws the media, and actually there are a lot of outcry, a lot of very angry outcry after this happened in China, in the last several years, in some of these. So some of the things we've been doing to deal with this, I will talk about some of these, and talk about the causes, and talk about some of my research, and so on. And maybe you will be interested in doing something, or maybe learning more about this. So what I want to draw here, of course, is to talk about the China economic success story, briefly. The China economic success story in the last 40 years, in a nutshell, in a very simplified form, is really China being able to become the world's factory, okay, made in China, become a world's factory, like this. And one of the crucial elements in making this work for all these is that, so these are migrants, this is a map that I drew on the flow, the major flow of migrants coming from the coastal, from the inland provinces to the coastal area here to work, during the Chinese New Year, they go back home, and the most powerful thing that get this is that we have 170 million cheap and mobile labor in China that really make the China world's factory take. And of all these, I said, the most powerful, potent component of this is China price. Okay, there's one thing called the China price. if you cannot beat the China price, there's no way that you can survive. If you want to do anything, you have to, with reference to the China price. China price sets the bottom, okay, out there, and created that massive important thing. So I think this is quite familiar to all of us, in the United States. So what I want to make relate to this is that to talk about the China price, we need to also talk about the Chinese urbanization. Okay, the Chinese urbanization here is very interesting because normally when we talk about urbanization, talk about urban population growth, we'll have one line, just this line. And this is what is happening in China. Like Chinese urban population used to be around 200 million here, 180, but it moved up to about, I think, around 800 million, 2000, at the end of last year, around close to around 800 million. So this is the kind of typical story. But important thing is that the Chinese urbanization is not just one line, not the first line. The top line that I show you, there's also the dotted line. The red line here also shows that, this line here shows that you also actually have two types of population. One is called the urban population, the people who live in the city, including the migrants. But here you also can differentiate, there's actually another class of migrant, or another class of population is called the people who are hukou. So you can see that the hukou population is actually much smaller. It's only around 600 million, around this time. And in between, you have about 220 million migrant population, people who do not have hukou. So this is what we're talking about. And along with the Chinese economic success, you can see that this is this part is really growing. This is what's happening along this time. So this is time when China started to open. You can see that this is opening, but it's at the same time this is widening because you have all these cheap labor because the way it is done through the hukou system. So what is the hukou system? Here, let me briefly mention or go over this. So basically, this is something that China set up in 1958. It's something China modeled after the Soviet system. Okay, and it created two systems, two society. One is called the rural, one is called the urban. The urban class has the basic social welfare, basic services, security, while the urban class will not have. So it created two populations, and they are treated differently. The hukou system is the one who serves mainly as a system that prevents people from moving from the rural to urban. Okay, so the hukou system created this, and of course things got changed and complicated in between. Finally, I think it evolved into a system that is largely talking about whether you have local hukou or not local hukou system. So the local hukou mostly are urban population. The one that's so-called outside or non-local population, the rural population. So the major structure will remain. Okay, this is still remain. It's largely pretty much working along this sort of thing. So what does that mean really when we talk about having a hukou and without having a local hukou? So I think it lists all the main thing here. Legally, you don't have a local hukou. It means that you're not supposed to be living here forever. You can come here to work, but you get old, you need to go home. A lot of jobs actually are not open to you. Even though you're a Chinese citizen, if you don't have local hukou, you are not allowed to access a lot of social benefits, unemployment insurance, retirement benefits, and then also very limited education opportunity to children. We'll talk about this more. There's no political rights, and other rights are limited. Of course, political right perhaps is not the most important right in China at the moment. Okay, so this is not too important, but so you can come here to work, but I'm sorry that you cannot use the social service. So that's why the labor can be cheapened in this way, because you just pay them the wages, but not all the other things. They don't have access to things. And in the Shanghai propaganda brochure, you see that they said all children are our children. They said it very upfront in the brochure. In reality, that's not quite true. Migrant kids, you don't belong here. Okay, that's what is really happening, and this is something that I want to delve into here a little bit here. In the bigger picture, this is a little op-ed I wrote some years ago. That's 6 or 7 years ago now. It's called In the City But Not of the City. Talk about this Chinese urbanization. When this came out later, also in the South China Morning Post, a major newspaper in Hong Kong, English newspaper, I think they put a really nice, what is called op art. Okay, you can see that this is the one who had hukou will be living here, the one without hukou will be in the basement, dark, maybe even no windows and so on. And literally, this is what is happening like in Beijing even today. I think some estimate puts that there's about still 1 million people who live mostly in very substandard basement. A lot of these are air raid shelters. There are no window, no facility, and they live there. There's about 1 million people. And most of them are migrant workers in Beijing today. Like I get to know someone who's working on this subject, on this. So when it comes to the policy on the migrant children, and this is what is happening, just a brief sum up here. The migrant children, as I've said, are those who accompanied the parents to the city. There are about 170 million workers in the city, according to, I think, reasonable estimate they have done. And the 2000 census shows that there were about 35 million migrant children, and about same in 2015 by census or the mini census. So they have not changed very much out there. But you can see, for those of you who are a little more demographic, you can see that the number here actually appears to be really small compared to 107 million workers, because these are mostly, like most of them are married, like 80%, 70% married. You expect that at least you will be easily, if they're just having one kid, you'll be easily having at least 80 million kids. Like a couple, you know, who have, like, you divide this by 2, you have 85 million. So in fact, it worked out. You will see that, as I will show you, it worked out that these 170 million migrant workers have a total of about 100 million children. So the question is that only about 35, about 1/3 of them are able to come to the city. The other 2/3 were left behind in the countryside, not with their parents. So this is what is happening. So the Chinese education policy, 85, the mandatory 9-year grade 1 to 9 for all, that's in the constitution. Education law 1995 says that everybody should have equal opportunity, that's also in the education law. 2001, they also here, migrant children cannot really go to migrant school, cannot go to public school in the city, and they could only go to makeshift migrant school. So what does a makeshift migrant school look like? I think this is a real picture in Beijing. So migrants in the 1990s in Beijing went to construction site and have a little stool as a desk, and that's the way how they operated education in the 1990s. Okay, this is a real picture from Beijing on this. Very, very bad, obviously. You can see that. So starting from 2001, a new policy now came out, and the government mandated that from the grade 1 to 9, these kids, migrant kids, should be educated in the place where their parents work. Okay, so this is what not immediately implemented. It took a few years for the local government to implement some of it, not even all of it. So this is gradually done. Okay, and it's very interesting. If you look at Beijing, I noticed that while this was gradually implemented, partly because the great Beijing populace itself was aging rapidly. They will have not enough kids to go to the public school. So on the one hand, they're closing the public schools because there are not enough kids. But on the other hand, the migrant kids was doing their school on the construction site. So you can see how ironic this happened. So there were teachers who were very angry, and partly because they want to protect their job too. They actually fought for the migrants. And so finally they were able to get into some of the school, open up a little bit public school, or allow some migrant school to survive. So in the place where I have done more research in Shanghai, I estimated about 70 to 80% of existing migrant children actually was able to go to public schools, including some migrant school, okay, grade 9 to, and still have a lot of problem. It's still, even if they go to school, there's still a lot of problem. For example, there was separate school for locals and migrants. Like the school that I'll show you is totally, if you like to use the US term, this is called segregation. Totally just migrants. Okay, migrant go to one school, local go to another school. That's totally like that. So in that school, even though I think it's a good school, I think in my opinion, it's a good school. But even some of them work in the same school, they also have a lot of problems. For example, Professor Lan in Taiwan has done some really interesting work on this subject. This is based on her paper in the China Quarterly looking at on this subject. That in a school, it's very much still in the same school. They actually were divided. So the migrants children go to this section. The local go to this section, and there is no playground on this side. Okay, and there's actually a wall, a fence that separates them. This is where you can see that. So this is what Professor Lan said, apartheid model of migrant school. It's integration. So that's all. So you can see that this reminds us here for people who understand U.S. history, of course, easily will be the Jim Crow kind of thing that's going on here, very much. And this is still very much. In fact, I just read a news on this 2 weeks ago on this. This is happening in Jiangsu, in Suzhou, exactly. On this, there's a big news on this subject about migrants being integrated in some of this form like this, and then the local parents rebel against this. They didn't like this, and so on. So you can say they still face a lot of problem. But this is not the end of this. This is only one part of this. Actually, one of the more important part, and sometimes this is overlooked, is that even though they provide some limited opening for them to go to 1 to 9, they're totally off limits when they go to beyond 9. So beyond 9, you have to go back home. Okay, so this is really where the trick really and the impact really start to come out. So to continue, they have to go back home. And also, in order to study their home, like Anhui's exam, Anhui's exams for high school, because if you want to test into high school, you have to go through an exam called 中专, sorry, 中考, you have to go through an exam called 中考. The curriculum going into the high school called 中考 and also college in different provinces are different. So there's no way that you finish your grade 9 in Shanghai. Luckily, if you can finish all that, because it's not easy even to get into grade 6 through 9. It's very hard actually in Shanghai for a migrant. Very, very hard, increasingly. Very, very hard. So even if you can do that, you cannot really finish grade 9 and jump back to go to your grade 10 in Anhui, because you have to go through that test. The test tests different things. The curriculum, Anhui is different. Guangxi has a different curriculum. Every province has different things. So in order to do that, you actually have to leave much earlier. You have to start maybe start grade 10 at least out there, and then grades through grade 11, and then you can do your test at grade 12. So you can see it create all kinds of complications out there. Even though on paper you can go through 1 through 9. Reality you cannot. And there's a really interesting Malala in China. That was not drawing the same kind of attention of Pakistani, Malala elsewhere. This girl, Zhang Haide, that's her name here, Haite, was actually born in Shenzhen when their parents was a migrant in Shenzhen. I think she's original was from Jiangxi. And they moved to Shanghai. She was able to actually finish grade 1 through 9. And then suddenly, she was said that you could not continue. So she came out and wrote a long article. And it's interesting, this got published in the People's Daily on this subject. So it generated tons of attention. And during this time, this is 2012, on this side of fighting. And you can see that she was featured in the national newspaper on this fighting, like right here. I think this is her, about education justice, and about this. She was right here protesting on this and so on, and really make a fight. And I think she finally could not really go on, even though despite all this attention, people supported her. But of course, the local was very much against her. Okay, the local said, oh, you don't belong here. You belong somewhere else. Go back home. That sort of thing. There was a lot of things being said. So this drawn a lot of attention. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the latest news I heard last year that she was finally admitted to a top college, because by the time she's now in college, into the United States last year, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's something that because of that fight. She was able to go to some school and finally, got into a top college. So what is happening here, if we can go down to a little numbers, I can show you, because I love numbers, I love the population number. You can see that here I show you using the census data of 2010. This is Chinese 6th census, 2010, and show you the age structure of what they collected, and show in the census data. So what is happening, you can see that here, the darker color here shows the people without hukou, and the lighter color here shows those kids with the local hukou. You can see that if you look at the age here, this is age baby here all the way through 17, not the kids. You can see that here is a more or less a more stable kind of setup, which shows there's some little ups and downs reflecting each year, little variation in the policy of the one-child policy. Sometimes a little more stringent. Sometimes I think maybe there's a good year. This is maybe the year of the dragon, that parents want to have more dragons. So you show up a little bit more. But this you can see that they're by and large around fluctuating around 80,000 a year, around that sort of thing. But if you look at the migrant children picture, it's quite different. You can see that they came here a lot more earlier, like when they're young, they were with their parents, usually they were in Shanghai, but they started to be dropping, and of course when you get into the more, this is harder, into the middle school year, it's dropping even more and more, and then suddenly when you come to age 14, so on, they are really very, very few. Okay, so you can see that, and then this started to go up again, because now they are now coming here to work. They have become workers. So suddenly they come back here. You can see that this is what is happening. This is quite true. So this is also correlated very well with the enrollment data. This is the enrollment of the migrant here around the same time. You can see that in grade 1, they have a lot of them. And then they started to really dropping. And here, after grade 6, grade 7 drops very rapidly. So you can do some number, you can calculate some number. I did some of this and some of my article. But the big picture that I want to show you then, the result of all these is to create a very, very extraordinary, very abnormal, I think, in my view. Because when you are seeing a very large population like Shanghai is around 24 million people. This is like whole California, almost whole. You never see a structure that look like this. How would you describe this shape? Anyone? Yes? Anyone? Anyone want? Is there anyone who?
That looks like an upside down top.
Okay, that's good. I want something a little more elegant.
Looks like a spade.
Spade? Yeah, that's good. Anyone?
Tree.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's right. This is pyramid. Yeah, this is a bit typical. But what is this?
A Christmas tree.
Christmas tree. Did you heard me before? No.
I just don't know how no one said that.
Okay. Yeah, this is a Christmas tree. Yeah, exactly. This is a Christmas tree. This is in fact, my colleague who specialized in demography was stunned. She said, this is a Christmas tree. And you have never seen a large population at this level, like more than 10 million, that will show up as a Christmas tree. So you can see that this is amazing, because you can see that it's all young people, the adults here, when they come to the kids, it's really very little, very few. And this comes out from two reasons. One, of course, the local. In fact, I have some data that breaks down into it, but we're not getting too complicated. The local itself, actually, the local kids also are shrinking because of one-child policy of all along. So they are shrinking. The non-local, the migrants, are not allowed or barred indirectly from coming. So the creative is very, very weird, I think, in my way, and very unsustainable. You can see this is not going to be sustainable. I wrote, you can see that this is Beijing, the same. Okay, so this is nothing, this is Shanghai, this is Beijing, it shows the same. And I wrote a piece on this in the South London Post called China Missing Children. So you ask where do they go? Okay, the missing children. And you can see that you can also put a comparison. I think I put a comparison here. You can see this is Shanghai. This is Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is aging even more rapidly. This is Japan, which is also aging rapidly. But you never see something like this at this end. In fact, I calculated that if you look at what happened in Shanghai, the percentage of children, meaning people who are below age 18, like 0 to 17, is only about 10% of the population. Hong Kong still has 16%. Japan has 17%. So you can see that this is a far more precarious, far more aging situation. So you obviously want to ask, where do these kids go? Like this, where they should be there with the parents, but then no. Obviously, the answer is pretty simple, because they are left behind. Okay, they are left behind, and you can see this is actually a more refined picture. That you can see the locals. This is local population. Those with hukou, they are shrinking too. But the migrants is predominantly just young adults here. In their 20s, 30s, 40s, and then very few. So these are the left behind children. And the left behind children, as I already alluded to early on, is now running somewhere around about 2/3 of 100 million, because all the migrants workers is about 107 million. We're talking about workers. All of them, you can expect that there are about 100 million children. 1/3 of them ended up in the city with their parents. 2/3 of them ended in the countryside. So this is what is happening in some of the figures. And the most extreme case, about 2 million, for example, using the 2010 census, show that 2 million of them live alone, with no parents at all, no relatives at all. Okay, most of them live with relatives, with their grandparents. Okay, so and there's some figure that shows that they don't see their parents very much, only once a year, so on and so forth. I did some calculation. It shows that Shanghai alone itself created roughly about 2 to 3 million left behind children. So depending on what sort of assumption that you use, but I can really pin this down to be quite accurately around 2 to 3 million here. So this is another picture of a snapshot of, this is coming out of CNN. Using the 2010 census, you can give you an idea about what, about half of them actually were with one parent. Okay, so mostly the man, the father. There are also some mothers too who have left, but there's a one parent family, about half of them, and then another 1/3 of them live with grandparents, and then another 10% live with relatives, and then a small percentage that basically just alone. Okay, and usually these are a little bit older. These are usually teenager here. Some even very early teenager, like 10, 12, years, and there are some of the numbers. They obviously have all kinds of issues. The 2015 mini census, China carried out a national 1% survey on this, and this is a report that's published last year, based on the same kind of criteria, and this gives you some sense of what is happening. So you can see that this is 2015. What is happening as I show, these are the left behind children, and then these are migrant children on the right side. Maybe I'm running out of battery here. See. So this is migrant children. These are the left behind children. You can see that it has not changed very much over there. This is what's happening. If you're interested, we can come back and look at this. And this is something just freshly done just about 2 weeks ago to give you some sense of what is happening in terms of bigger picture. And you can see that we can look at more longitudinal kind. You can see that this started to grow along with the large increasing migrant population. Okay, migrant workers are more, because here you can see that in 2000 you have only about 100 million, but now it's gone to about 170 million. Of course, their children that are going with them are rising. But most of the time, actually, you can see that the left behind children has doubled right here, from 30 million to about 70 million. So altogether, they make up about 100 million children migrant, and this is about 1/3 of all the children in China. Okay, so 1/3 of the children in China is in that category. Okay, as a percentage of all children, you can see that it's 40%, 38%. Like if you look at this, like if you can count this, so you can look at the various indicator, it will give you the major trend. So what is going on here is that you can see that they're increasing, but the increasing rate mostly happen in the left behind children. So increasingly they're more left behind, even though they are doing this. The left behind children, as you can expect, face a lot of issues. The more extreme case, and there are there's scores of all these. This is a newspaper that I happened to be reading on the day that I arrived in Beijing in 1930. This is on the China Daily, on the front page. They talk about, as you can expect, that, offenders, sex offender that prey on the children left behind. And sometimes, most sadly, some of these are actually teachers. So in some province, I think if I remember correctly, in one province, likely Henan, they even now have taken a very draconian measure that in the girls' dormitory, because a lot of girls now actually are going into boarding school. This is another interesting part of that left behind children, that because of the consolidation of the schools, the rural schools are being closed down because they are depopulation. Okay, so they consolidate the school into towns or into some small major centers, and this will create a really long distance that they cannot do their daily commute back home. So they have to go to boarding school. Boarding school create all kinds of issues, including issue of being sex abuse, because when they stay overnight, there will be times that people can take advantage. And some of these, unfortunately, as I said, are teachers. So now in one place, they even make a very draconian measure that the girls' dormitory, no matter what reason, no matter what time of the day, the male person, either a boy or teacher or whatever, cannot go into that one dormitory, to prevent this from happening, or any excuse. Okay, so you can see the seriousness of this. So there will be things like this that's more on the more serious side. There are things that are less serious but still very, very troublesome, of very great concern. There are all kinds of accidents that happen to them when the parents are not around. Like the kids that talk about that, got themselves into a dumpster, got killed by accident. So there are, as I said, there are tons of this all the time. Anytime, if you follow it closely, you'll see that there's all kinds of stuff like this all the time. It's just something very, very heartbreaking to hear some of these. And even those there who don't seem to get into accidents and things, but they also suffer from all kinds of things. There are study that shows that they suffer from psychological separation stress. They have all kinds of issues. Maybe sometimes they have a little more money compared to the local compared to the children with parents around. The migrant parents tend to have a little money because they are working outside, they send money. They have a little more pocket money to use. But they suffer from a lot of things. They miss their parent. They function, do not social very well. They are all kinds of stuff do this. There's actually a very good video on the Wall Street Journal website. If you like, you can go and watch this. It's talking about some more ordinary kid, how she's being a 6 or 7 year old, have do the daily chore as an adult, cooking, everything, and become more or less like an adult. This is actually a very good girl. She did well in school. That was featured in the Wall Street Journal. On one of the video on this. So what I want to then do, this is some of my latest research on this subject that I recently, this is in the last few months, I examined the Chinese census and also the mini census data very thoroughly, 2015 mini census. So they have a very large sample that you can play with. So we can do some geography, look at some geography of all these children, different types of children. So here I show you one picture. You can see that if we look at a percentage term about each province, and Beijing being a province in the Chinese administrative classification, you can see that this gives you some sense of the color here shows that children of non-parents or non-migrants. So these are the children of not migrants, but these are children of the migrants. So you can see that these provinces here, like Beijing, Shanghai, Fujian, Sichuan, are the heaviest. You can say that more than half of the children that was surveyed in the 2015 mini census are actually children of migrants. So you can see that this is very, very prominent. So half of the kids in these provinces are actually the children of migrants. And then, but even in the very, very extreme here, there are very few of them, they still have like 25%. So this is almost universal, like what I'm trying to make. And obviously this is also somewhat kind of expected, because this is their parents' pattern, as I showed you. This is coming up on the 2015 mini census. So they They move from the inland to the coastal area, as we all know. These are the major migratory flow. And here I do some mapping of where they are in terms of the numbers. So the major concentration here is in Guangdong, as you can expect. Migrant children, Fujian, Jiangsu, Shanghai, and then here Shandong and Beijing. These are the, and then the left behind children actually are obviously in the inland, Sichuan, here Anhui, and so on, the Jiangxi. These are the major ones that has a color. So you can see that this pattern here, of course, is very much resembling the parents' geography, while the other one is showing where they come from. Okay. And then I also did some another exercise here, trying to do a little bit of measuring how many migrant children or trying to generate how many left behind children each province created by comparing some of the figures. So what I try to do is that I take the migrant adult population here, okay, each province, and then multiply with a national percentage, roughly about 0.45, which is the percentage, 0.45 ratio, 45%, meaning that each migrant should create about 0.45 kids. So I can generate how many kids this migrant adult will have, okay? And then compare how many of them actually are with them in the destination. So from here, then you can generate finally the migrant children that are left behind, the number of migrant children that are left behind is created, and then you can work out the percentage. So this is doing a little math, playing with this. And then we can then generate some result and look at which province is doing better, which province is more nasty, is nastier to migrant children, so that they have to keep their kids, because either through the school system or through the whole household registration system, the local has a lot of latitude, and they implement it differently in different provinces. So what I'm trying to do here is try to look at the degree of deterrence in each province by measuring the percentage of their kids that were able to make it to the destination. So this is the math, and then we can create a chart like this. So this is creating a chart of the left behind children generated by each province. So you can see that on the top here, out of the migrants that end up in Tianjin, about 85% of them actually are left behind. So only 15% of the children of the migrant was able to make it to Tianjin with their parents. The other 85% were left behind elsewhere for migrants whose destination is Tianjin. And this is not surprising. You can say Beijing is at the top here. Beijing is about 80%. Shanghai is about 80%. Only 20% was able with them. And you can do this, and then you can do all the provinces. Guizhou, Henan, Hebei actually turn out to be the more friendlier. They have a higher percentage of about half of them being able to go with them. Still half of them are left behind in the countryside. But even Guizhou here considered to be actually more lenient. You can see there's still half of them, but elsewhere you can see that there are a lot of them, about easily on average about 2/3 of them are left behind. But in the more extreme case, Tianjin, you have about 85% that was left behind, and Shanghai and so on. So these are the places here. These 6 or 7 places here are really the most deterrent, most unfriendly to migrant children. So that's why they have to end up having their kids in the countryside. They cannot really, because things are making very hard for them right there. It's also very interesting. I also want to make a note here that while I was doing this, I was looking at also some other research that was evaluating the provincial policy friendliness to children. It's very, very interesting. In the Beijing Normal University, they published a report. In fact, they've been doing this for many years. They published a report. I look at their 2017 report on this, and they identified 5 or 6 provinces that are considered the best top provinces to children in China. They have a rating on this. Guess what? Those five provinces at top right here. This is so amazing. So it must be either their data is wrong, because on the way that they are with the worst. But on their chart, they came out to be the best in terms of children-friendly policy in those provinces. But I think I actually think that their data are probably more like right. It's just that the way how they look at it is that they are looking at only the local children. They are not concerned about migrant children at all. Migrant children is not really in their purview, not at all. So you can see that, in fact, they speak to a very different two world. The places here that are considered the best for the local children are in fact the worst places for the migrant children. This is really a very two different world that we're looking at. I was quite amazed, later when I found out this is later when I compare the study. I thought they would be somewhat similar, but it's not. It's really totally opposite. So I did something similar, but I'm not going to get into. I think we don't have time to really get into this table, which actually shows similar results. So what is happening here? Let me conclude here briefly. Here is that while China actually have started doing something on the migrant children, in fact, Li Keqiang even said that the government is going to do the utmost to protect all the migrant children, left behind children. They are our children too. Talk about some of this here. In reality, particularly when the policy that was being implemented at the local level, they are actually not very friendly, particularly in the very large city like Shanghai and Beijing. In Beijing, in 2004, I think 2015, 2016, there was all the children that was demonstrating in the Bureau of the Education in Beijing, just right in front of the Bureau for a month, protesting. And you can see that they have something that's very simple. They want to go to school, but they were not. So the migrant kids were there for almost a month with their parents. They were protesting. And this continued went on. In some very extreme case, and this is not happening in Beijing, elsewhere too. In some of the provinces, you can see that this is all happening. This is in Zhejiang, the same thing that's happening. In some very extreme case, this father, after numerous attempts, the family stayed in Beijing for many, many years, but they missed, I think, one period of one of the documents. So on the final day, I think this is late May, when the result of whether her daughter was able to get into school or not, public school. After numerous attempts, spent months and weeks of running around different bureaucracy, he was told that her daughter could not go to school. In that anger, in that rage, he poured kerosene on himself and lit a fire and burned himself in a serious injury. Okay, he did not die in that. So you can see that things are getting into that extreme, into that sort of thing. 2016. Now this is even reported in the Chinese newspaper, and he was seriously burned. There was also in the Chinese New Year, at the end of the Chinese New Year, you also started to see some of these, and this was captured by some of the more sympathetic reporters. This is at the end of Chinese New Year when the parents are returning to their work, and the kid would not want the parent to go. And this boy, screamed loudly, 你们不能这样对我. You cannot do this to me. I want my mother to be with me. You cannot just go, And this will be captured in this picture. This is like, I think we have also something like this here when we talk about the separation of the parents from the illegal immigrants, so-called, here not too long ago. One other point I want to make here is that China, of course, we know that now China really needs a lot of children, and China ended the one-child policy 2 years ago. They wanted a lot of children. Isn't it, when you think about this, isn't it ironic that if you want more children, they are now trying to increase the fertility rate. They want a Shanghai woman to have 3 kids, maybe even, not just 2. They want more, kids, because they need this kid. But isn't it ironic that there are all these about 100 million kids out there that should be taken better care? Why don't they divert the resources to take care? These are the future, immediate future of China, really immediate future. But they are not doing it. They are actually making things, I think, in many aspects, actually worse for them. Isn't it really quite ironic that on the one hand, we want more children, wanted to have this, which of course is very important. China is aging rapidly, but at the same time, is doing this. So if we still have 5 minutes, we can run through a video on this. And before I end this, I will we'll play the video. But also, I want to show you that this is my website. I encourage you to see that. And on the top here, I put an article. This is talking about my own experience of being, I almost became a left behind child. But my mother did some great thing in that process. There was a migration that's going on as I reflect on this. So this came out on Mother's Day this year. For those of you who can read Chinese, you may be interested. But when I was doing this, I suddenly realized that there was that connection to that part of me that I got on to all this. So I'll play the video.
In China, not that long ago, most people lived in the countryside, looking after their animals and growing their own food. Life was hard, and people were poor. And then, everything started to change. Factories sprang up to make things that people all over the world wanted to buy. And suddenly, millions of people were on the move from the countryside to huge new cities, where they could get money by working in the factories. But when the adults moved away, they were not allowed to take their children with them. Millions of them were left behind in the countryside. They are now known as the left behind children. This is the story of one of them. My name is Tang Yuwen, and I'm 11 years old. I live here with my grandmother, my brother, and 2 cousins. My parents don't live here. They work in another city called Chengdu. They both work in factories, making clothes. My parents don't earn much, and they don't get to spend much time with us. But thanks to their hard work, we are not down and out. When Mom and Dad come back to visit, I run to meet them. I run a very long way, because I can't wait to be close to them. What I love most is to go fishing with them. On my own, I can only catch 1 or 2 fish, 3 at most. But when Mom and Dad are here, we catch lots of fish. During Chinese New Year, Mom and Dad visit for longer. We set off fireworks to celebrate. They start out small with not much light, but then they fly high into the sky and explode suddenly. They are bright and colorful and very beautiful. It's not easy for Mom and Dad to come back to visit us. They can only stay for a few days before they have to leave again. I wish they could take me with them. I don't want to be separated from them. I know it's hard for Mom and Dad to earn money. I don't want to cause trouble for them, but I miss them so much. It's very painful, but I can't do anything about it because I don't want to bother them. If I call them, I will disturb them. I can't do anything but wait. I really want them to come back. When I grow up, I won't leave here. This is my home. I want to do something big. I'd like to be a boss, run a factory. And I'll take my kids to my workplace so we can stay together.